Okay. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good morning for those that are in China and in other places. Hello, welcome everyone to the 2022 Fitch Colloquium. I am Jorge Otero-Pailos, Professor and Director of Historic Preservation at Columbia University's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. Our colloquium tonight is virtual. It's spread around the world, but it is made possible by our being at Columbia University and in New York. And it's in light of that that I want to start by acknowledging that we are gathered virtually here in New York in Lenapehoking, the unceded ancestral homeland of the Lenape peoples. And so I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Lenape community and their traditional territory, elders, ancestors, and future generations. And in acknowledging that as a school at Columbia in New York City and in the United States as a nation, this school was founded upon the exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples. And our school, GSAPP, is committed to addressing the deep history of erasure of indigenous knowledge in the professions in the built environment. And so today we are gathered to think about the built environment. And every year, the Fitch Colloquium gathers the world's leading figures to think about the built environment through the lens of preservation and to think about the key issues that are shaping the built environment and what preservation can do to address those issues. Now, this year's colloquium is organized in collaboration with the Museum of Modern Art, and it will address and examine the role of preservation in China's future. We are honored by the distinguished group of Chinese architects who will be presenting and discussing their works and ideas with us tonight. The idea for this conference really sprung out of a dialogue with Martino Stierli, the Philip Johnson Chief Curator of Architecture and Design at the Museum of Modern Art, in relation to the current exhibition that he and his team have curated, titled Reuse, Renew, Recycle, Recent Architecture from China, which is on view through July 4th. And I encourage all of you to go see it. I want to take this opportunity to thank Martino and the team at MoMA for this collaboration, and in particular, Evangelos Kotsioris, assistant curator at MoMA. Martino will say more about the exhibition in a minute, but I'll just say a few framing thoughts. The exhibition, of course, foregrounds the central role that preservation has taken in how Chinese architects think about the built environment and its future. And this is a dramatic shift from the way that we had become accustomed to thinking about Chinese architectural practice, primarily concerned with the creation of new cities, which from our perspective here in the United States seem to spring up almost overnight. The interest in the new seems to now have shifted to an interest in rethinking that existing built environment. Now, together with that come a number of really important questions, not only for China, but for the entire world. We come to the realization that the world is built up, that the kind of energy that we have spent to build up the world is no longer available to us to do it one more time, and that the world that we built up is falling apart and it requires a tremendous amount of care, but that we can't just simply rebuild the world because, again, we don't have that energy. So we have to think creatively about how we are going to maintain the existing built environment as it decays in a way that doesn't use up our resources and that deals with the problem of climate change. So from this perspective, new kinds of thinking are required, new ideas about what it means to be an architect, what it means to be creative, what it means to design, and to think of design not simply as new construction, and to think of development as not simply as new construction. And so it is really important for us to understand the role that China is playing in this rethinking of the built environment. And the leading figures that are going to be joining us today are going to open up a whole new set of questions for us to understand. China has taken a leading role in the world's economy, has taken a leading role in many aspects of our lives. Much of the material world that we experience as Americans is deeply enmeshed in material flows that involve China as well. And our understanding as preservationists of China has not kept pace with this leading role. Our understanding of preservation in China as Americans, and I would say as in Western culture in general, has been rather scant. So this is the beginning of an opportunity for us to begin to unpack the new thinking about preservation that is happening in China, and to begin to enter into a dialogue with the leading practitioners that are thinking, that are leading this turn towards preservation in the fields of the built environment. One of the things that is striking about the work that we're going to see in the colloquium is the way in which preservation has been harnessed as a way, as a creative act, as a rethinking about creativity. And that, of course, ties very much to the way that we at Columbia think about preservation. Preservation is a creative act for us. We understand it as a way to rethink the role of the past in contemporary culture, in contemporary society. And we think of the built environment as both a material and a social reality. And so in the same breath, the built environment for us is a material and a social reality. And so every act of preservation from our perspective at Columbia is a sociopolitical and a cultural act. And so it's in that light that we want to really think about the work that we're going to see and to discuss it and probe its implications, both environmental, in terms of the culture, the politics, and that they manifest aesthetically. Because in the end, preservation lands up in the world and has a physical, aesthetic reality, and impresses us with that aesthetic reality as human beings. And so experience will be one of the things we will be discussing today. Now, the experience of this particular conference today is going to be very different than most conferences that we've held, most Fitch Colloquia. Most Fitch Colloquia have been one day. They've been one full day. This is our first sleepover Fitch Colloquium, because we're going to be having an evening session, which starts today. And then we're all, in America at least, we're all going to go to bed, and then we're going to wake up. And tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. will be the next part of the Fitch Colloquium. So it's kind of exciting to think that we will have the opportunity to reflect on this first session, and then have the second session tomorrow. I have to say that one of the pleasures of organizing this conference, apart from the collaboration with Martino, Evangelos, and the MoMA team, has been the role of our own students at Columbia University in helping to organize it, the way that they've really leaned in to help us identify the key leading figures in China that are working on preservation. Some of them are part of the show at MoMA, and others are not, and others have been identified by our students. I have to say that we are just so fortunate at Columbia to have some of the most dynamic, creative, and intelligent Chinese students, so committed to this building bridges across cultures and across China and the United States in particular. And so I want to take a moment to thank them, because this conference was really made possible in many ways by them and the conversations we had and the suggestions that they made. Luxi Yang, Sushi Yin, Ziming Wang, Daoxin Shen, Shiyu Li, Yinjie Tian, Hongye Wang, Wenjing Shui, Zihao Zong, Shuya Zhao, Jianing Wei, and Ye Shu. They are amazing, and we are just really indebted to them. They will be participating in the discussion afterwards. The format of our conference is going to be a series of presentations, followed by a conversation. The first of the two will be moderated by Martino, and the second tomorrow I will moderate. I want to finish by thanking Dean Weiping Wu for her support. She herself embodies that bridge between China and the United States, and her work in scholarship. And I also want to thank Sarah Grace Godwin, Program Manager for Historic Preservation, for all the work that she has done to make sure that this conference runs smoothly, as well as the GSAPP events team, which is just unbelievable, from Stefan Bodeker to Lucy Kresbach and everybody else on the team. So thank you all. So without further ado, I would like to turn the virtual podium over to Martino Stierli, who will be moderating the first session. And I want to thank you, Martino, and thank you all for joining us tonight. Looking forward to the event.
Yes, thank you so much, Jorge, for this wonderful introduction, and obviously also for the opportunity to collaborate on this event. You were the one who reached out to us and suggested this after having seen the exhibition currently on view at the Museum of Modern Art. And so we're very thrilled to be able to co-host this event. I want to thank you for your spirit and for your enthusiasm in making this possible. I want to thank your team, in particular Sarah Grace Godwin and the whole GSAPP team who are working behind the scenes to make this a successful event. And of course, I also want to thank the speakers tonight whom I'm going to introduce in just one moment. And finally, I would also like to thank Evangelos Kotsioris, who has been the co-curator of this exhibition here at MoMA and whose contribution was equally seminal in making this a success. I wanted to start with sharing just a few images of the ongoing exhibition in the ground floor of the Museum of Modern Art. I'm suspecting that many of you who are based in New York have seen the exhibition already. If you have not, you still have a chance to see it until early July, as Jorge was mentioning. I suspect equally that those of you who are based in China have not yet had a chance to see the exhibition. So I'm hoping that these three images that we have assembled for tonight will, in a way, substitute a little for an actual visit. Reuse, renew, recycle, recent architecture from China. You're seeing here the title wall of the exhibition. I think tries to rethink what contemporary architecture is, and Jorge was already mentioning that we generally understand contemporary architecture as something new, starting from scratch, creating new buildings. And in that sense, perhaps as something that is antithetical to the notion of preservation. And what we were trying to do in this exhibition was to highlight an emerging generation of practitioners in China who are actually, I think, trying to bridge the gap between contemporary architecture on the one hand and preservation in the other by a really innovative, a variety of innovative approaches, differing approaches to deal with the pre-existing urban environment, with the reuse of pre-existing materials or buildings, with the adaptive reuse, with the recycling of building materials, and so on and so forth. And for our exhibition, we have coined this idea of sustainability as not just something that is related to ecology, which of course is very, very important, but that the idea of sustainability that is shared by this group of architects or by this generation of architects really relates to questions of cultural and social sustainability, which directly relate back to, I think, the notion of preservation that Jorge was outlining in his remarks. And of course, we think that all these three categories, the ecological, the cultural, and the social, have to be considered holistically. And we also believe that the projects in our exhibition speak to this more holistic understanding of what sustainability perhaps could and should be thought of. So here is a look into the gallery, looking back to the entrance wall in the far right. You see actually here in the foreground on the right, a project by Philip Yuan, who's going to be one of the speakers, as well as a couple of other projects by various architects we're not going to hear from tonight. But then as we turn to the left, we see here another installation view that shows us on the left the wall dedicated to the Bamboo Theater by Tiantian, whom we are going to hear from in an instance. And a little further to the left, unfortunately out of view here, would be a project by Zhang Ke, who is going to be our first speaker tonight. So I'm very happy to say that all the speakers of our first panel tonight are actually presented in our exhibition. Excellent. So with that, I would like to start and introduce all the three speakers at once. So I will make this introduction and then pass the presentation to the three speakers. So our first speaker tonight is Zhang Ke. He's the founder of the award-winning architectural office Zhao Standard Architecture, founded in 2001. He's a graduate from the Harvard Graduate School of Design and the Tsinghua University in Beijing. The work of Zhao's standard architecture spans planning, architecture, landscape, and product design. Ke's design for the Micro-Yuan project was praised for its views on conservation and adaptive reuse of a historic Hutong courtyard in the center of Beijing. And likewise, his children library and art center was the recipient of the 2016 Hakan Award. Zhang Ke's work has been featured at the Venice Architecture Biennial, the MAC Vienna, the DAM in Frankfurt, Eides Gallery in Berlin, the V&A in London, and MoMA, among other venues. The book, Hutong Metabolism, was just published with Architangle in Berlin, and I'm holding a copy here, and I would highly recommend reading for further information on his work. The second speaker tonight will be Xu Tiantian. She is the founder of DNA Architecture, Design and Architecture located in Berlin. Xu holds a B.Arch from Tsinghua University in Beijing and an M.Arch in Urban Design from Harvard GSD. Her practice seeks to distill architecture down to its fundamental elements, or what Xu calls the DNA of building practice. Her work was awarded the WA China Architecture Award in 2006, the Architectural League of New York's Young Architects Award by the Architectural League in 2008, and the Moira Gemmell Prize for an Emerging Architect in 2019. Her long-term work in Songyang County is what she calls architectural acupunctures, has drawn international praise and is currently featured in the MoMA exhibition. And also here too, we have a recent publication by Park Books that I would highly recommend in this connection. And then last but not least, our third speaker for tonight is Philip Yuan. Dr. Yuan is the founder of Archi-Union Architects, an architectural practice based in Shanghai. Architecture Union combines traditional Chinese culture and digital construction processes into a practice he labels digital tectonics, a term that encapsulates the binding of ecology, technology, and craftsmanship. The work of Archi-Union architects has been exhibited in venues and events such as the Venice Architecture Biennial, the Chicago Architecture Biennial, the Hong Kong Biennial, the Triennial of Milan, and many more international venues in recent years. Philip is a professor of architecture at Tongji University in Shanghai and is the author, editor, and translator of more than 20 volumes, including Computational Design and Digital Fabrication, both with Neil Leach, and Collaborative Laboratory, Works of Archi-Union and Fab Union. Yuan was the 2019 to 2020 Thomas Jefferson Visiting Professor of Architecture at the University of Virginia School of Architecture. Wonderful. And so with that, I would like for Zhang Ke to come to us and start his presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Martino and Jorge. It's a great pleasure to join this colloquium. My short talk would be titled Hutong Metabolism, same as the book that Martino has just shown. I'm going to show mainly the Micro-Yuan project, but I'm going to also quickly flip through the images of the Micro Hutong, which was at exhibition in MoMA and a few other renovation projects of the Hutong in the Metabolism series. Hutongs in Beijing, the traditional. Sorry, I'm trying to. Okay. The traditional courtyard and alley system of urban dwelling that is the most essential part of the city have been captured at the center of the battleground between development, conservation, and revitalization in the past decade. After 2 decades of redevelopment frenzy in the old city of Beijing, the hutongs are on the verge of being either completely erased to make space for office towers, apartment and shopping malls, or disfigured by kitsch renovations that fake images of a nostalgic past. The subtle complexity of the hutongs as authentic contemporary urban spaces have been overlooked by both advocates of tabula rasa redevelopment and by the defenders of historical restoration. In either case, the operation involves the relentless exodus of hutongs' traditional dwellers, resulting in the gradual disappearance of ethnic diversities in the Hutong communities and a rapid diminishing of Hutong's traditional cultures. Here you see a few images that we took in 2016, right in the center of Beijing, near the Forbidden City. The Hutong Metabolism series aims to explore alternative perspectives of looking at hutongs and their problems, to consider them as living organisms, to study them both as macro-scale infrastructures and in micro-scale units, to respond to the problems of both historic and futuristic thinking, and to explore the potential of hutongs and courtyards as generator of communal spaces and catalyst of social interaction. So the first project, actually the main project I'm going to show is Microyard Children's Library. Here shows the location of the project. I'm going to do the timing, sorry. This is a typical quiet hutong that is really just within 1,000 meters distance from the Forbidden City in the southwest side of the city. So this is the existing condition. It was a typical 大杂院, what we call a big messy courtyard, shown on the map of the left. And what happens in 99% of the conservation practice is to clean everything, like shown in the right-hand plan, erasing the contemporary urban history in the past that happened, or the residents built up in the past 6 to 7 decades. So our question was to see if it's possible not to erase them, but really to recognize the contemporary layers and contemporary urban history that was really records the lives of residents in the past 6-7 decades in the urban center, which is typical of almost every courtyard and hutong courtyards in the center of the city. And here you see we proposed a small inserted concrete children's library on the left, and redesign and renovate and reuse some of the structures in the middle and in the right to make a small art gallery and dancing studio and art studio on the back. So yeah, this shows how the 6 square meter art pavilion that wraps around the big tree and providing access for children to go to the roof and get close to the tree and the inserted library. And of course, we used recycled bricks and for the walls and pavements. And later, I'm going to talk about the concrete that we use for the inserted children's library. From inside of the small inserted space. We tested and experimented on adding Chinese ink in the concrete to make it match better the surroundings of the gray brick in the hutongs. Yeah, here it was actually, we failed in the test in the experiment, so the ink was not even, but it came out quite nice. In a way, it immediately cast the space back into the background. I'm just going to flip through quickly the images. So by inserting this this built concrete space carefully under the existing wooden structure, it creates an interesting dialogue between the existing and the new, which is of course always the focus, the important theme in terms of architecture when we come to the issues of renovation and renewal. And of course, the proposed program, we spent a lot of time debating what is the most appropriate program we could introduce to the hutong. So in this case, the space is proposed not as a private space, rather it has a public program that welcomed kids in the neighborhood to use it always, and it's always free of charge. All the details were designed in a very careful way, like we are renovating a Western cathedral with you see the gutter and cover with copper and all this. This is the bigger room of it was 2/3 of a former temple that we proposed to use it as a multifunctional space, as a dancing studio, and there have been over 60 events before the pandemic started. The Halloween party. So this first project was really dealing with introducing public programs to the hutong, to the courtyards, and making it a bit more public. and providing the much needed public space to serve the residents, and also recognizing contemporary urban history, layers of contemporary urban history, instead of wiping them out. This is some pictures we did the mock-up. We brought the mock-up 1-to-1 to Venice Biennale. The second project, really a micro hutong, which is on display in MoMA currently, is really dealing with how to create desirable space within extremely limited area in urban center. This is about just 40 square meters. So the aim is to experiment of how to create 5 rooms and a courtyard within 40 square meters. Again, concrete with Chinese ink. I would just quickly flip through. So this is the second issue we are interested in, how to create desirable space for living within extremely limited boundaries. The third, of course, recycled materials collected right in the hutong was used for the facade. And the third project, I wouldn't talk in detail about the design, but one thing is very important. The third issue we're concerned with is really about, it's common to all the old city renovation. It's about the toilets, the amenities. What we did a survey, and then it came out that one thing that is desperately needed for all hutong residents is a proper toilet and shower and a kitchen. So we spent 1.5 years designing and developing this manufacturable functional module, which is 2 meter by 2 meter. It has toilet, shower, kitchen, wash machine, dry machine, and the king size bed on top. This was intended not just for the hutong, but intended for all old city renovations, and possibly even in remote areas and countryside. We've been developing this still constantly, and the last one I flipped through quickly is the social housing. We started and finished it during the pandemic, which is to create 12 rooms, units for people to live, and each house, each unit is only about 15 square meters. And with inserted toilets and shower, etc. And we are further developing now even smaller toilet shower modules, and hopefully could be used in our Yuan Terrace Fields village renewal and conservation projects. And here's this hutong metabolism book published by Architango and together with Aga Khan Award. And thanks to Martino, also wrote a very important article inside. And also this catalog of our exhibition that took place in Berlin, AIDES. My team, this was a few years ago. Thank you. This is the end of the presentation. I think I've kept the time okay. Thank you, Martino.
Thank you so much, Zhang Ke. In fact, you're an overachiever. I think you could have spent a few more minutes, but we'll definitely come back to your presentation. If you wouldn't mind, stop sharing your screen. We can then move onward right to our second speaker, Tiantian. Before we do so, however, I would like to remind our audience to please start typing in your questions into the Q&A box at the lower right of your screen. I will be reviewing those and will come back to your questions after the three presentations. We've already received a few questions, but please feel free to bring up your questions as they occur to you, and we'll come back to them. So thank you so much, and welcome, Tiantian.
Thank you. Thanks to Fitch Colloquium, today I'm going to share our Zhongyan story, which is the work we have been done in the past 8 years in Zhongyan County, a typical agricultural county in China. And in this process, architecture has become the strategy to revive rural villages and also to build up an interaction and circulation between the villages and the county urban center. So here, architecture is not only to preserve the vernacular building method and language, but also helps to preserve local communities and life. And usually in this, the method, we call it architectural acupuncture, and small-scale public program is introduced into each village according to its context and heritage, and to restore the village identity. And eventually it's built up this mapping system in the county of Zhongyan. So the first project we started in the first village project was this in Tiantian village, a very typical mountain village. And we proposed to preserve a cluster of abandoned vacant houses at the entrance of the village, to work with renovation. This is to preserve the very original fabric of this ancient village. So the building envelope keeps intact, and we mostly work with the interior or reorganize, open up the space and reorganize into the space into different functions to accommodate different programs. And the construction was done by the local skilled workers, local villagers, with traditional method, tenon and mortise wooden structure, which is very easy to assemble on site, and was done in, the whole construction was done, finished in just a few months, less than 5 months. That's the overall profile, maintained the original way. And all the spaces are reused for different functions, public programs. For example, this is an artist studio with fabric dyeing art programs. And the second floor used to be storage room, can be converted into a room for homestay business. All the details are done in a very local traditional method. And if you look at all these joints, all the wooden nails are done by local craftsmen. And this has also become a very popular cultural and educational program in the region. So very often a Chinese village, an ancient Chinese village, is a large family clan with one or a few surnames. The traditional to respect their ancestors as the pride and honor has become the inspiration for us to work in this Yuan village. This used to be a most glorious village, but it's in the ancient time, but it's surrounded by modern factory since the 90s. So the discovery of Wang Jing, the imperial scholar from Ming Dynasty, also one of the 3 most famous historical figures in the Songyang County. Wang Jing, from originally from this village, has bring the motivation and also the sense of pride and honor to all the villagers, to the whole community. And a new memorial hall dedicated to this ancestor Wang Jing is programmed at the center of this village, facing the original Wang's ancestral temple. And it's the new memorial hall. The building is mapping with the village fabric to compose this volume into different compartments or different chapters. And here we worked with local building material and method. For example, this ram earth wall is done by the local villagers, and the structural system is the concrete bearing wall system, just like the other modern houses around. So the idea is that to work with both ancient and modern material or technique is to create a dialogue with the neighbors, either ancient, either traditional, or modern, contemporary, but also to kind of build up this bridge, or with this ancestral to merge with its context. And with this mapping of the fabric, the building has 17 corners. All these 17 corners are structural corners, and as well as memorial corners. And each corner is lit from top with a stone carving statue indicating the moment of a specific moment of a Wang Jing's lifetime. All these stone carving are done by the factory just outside of the village. And all these moments or on these memorial corners, creating a lifetime, indicating the life story of ancestor Wang Jing. Unlike the traditional Chinese courtyard buildings with the void in the center open to the sky, here the composition of this space is rather the reverse way. We are focusing on the corners, introducing light and all these memorial content. The corners are often less functional and often ignored. So here we wanted to take all the corners as the memorial stage to create a temple atmosphere, but at the same time also to free up the central space, the main space for different, just to accommodate different activities or functions for the village community. We've also worked with Hakka indenture tradition, indenture history in Shicang Hakka village as the cultural and historical heritage. And the indenture system is basically the legal system to a Hakka society, almost as a foundation to the Hakka society. In this case, we have been working with local masonry. We were able to revive this masonry technique in actually, which is long lost building technique in the region. And we took this, this museum as the opportunity to, with 3 skilled workers, masonry workers experts. They were able to train over a dozen young workers after this construction. So the building is as a background to the village, connecting the mountain. This local masonry technique has become very strong dialect, or the main very dominant characteristic in the space. So in this case, we preserve this small creek, original creek on site running from the mountain to the village. And with the water, the sound of water, the mist from skylight, and also the breeze passing through the space, this elements become the accents to soften up this intensity by this masonry material and form. In this Songyang story, we have a chapter dedicated to rural economy, which is based on the local agricultural production or heritage, which we think, which we consider as also as the intangible heritage in each village. And these also help to build up a local economic circulation in Songyang County. So the first project is a renovation and expansion of abandoned oil factory at the entrance, at the second site, at the entrance of the village. The original Chameleon Oil Workshop is a historical building with over 100 years of history. So this, the revive of this oil production program is to reactivate this workshop as a historical building, but also to introduce the production as an intangible cultural heritage from Hengkeng village to the visitors. So in other words, it's also to showcase this agricultural and cultural heritage as a live museum. So in this case, the original workshop is embedded by our new expansion, almost creating a labyrinth circulation in the space to discover when you finally arrive at the center. And our structure is, again, the traditional tenon and mortise wooden structure. And for the material, we were able to collect the pebbles from the creek and just make the walls and with the pebbles cut in half. And it's creating this contrast between the historical rammed earth wall workshop with this new expansion space. The drawing indicates that the original workshop is really the embedded at the center of this whole compound. And when you arrive at this center after this circular routes, you discover this production space with all the traditional wooden machinery tools made by wood and stone, operated by the local villagers. And the building, the original workshop, this historical workshop kept everything in its original way. We only replaced the skylight, the roof tiles, some of the roof tiles into the local glass tiles to bring in the light into the space and also to emphasize this atmosphere. So in this Xin village, is well known for its production of brown sugar in the winter season. And this is rather a modern factory with the villagers who are able to build their multiple layers, stories, houses, modern houses. So in this village, the production of brown sugar is the element to introduce, to restore the village's cultural identity. Similar to oil production, the production of brown sugar itself is a live performance. And with this new factory, we were able to establish a villager union to integrate all these individual family workshops and operating this new factory. All these working stations are operated by different individual family workshops, and they're lining up with the building structure and structure rhythm and skylights. So these are working as a background pattern for the movement and the motions by these cooking masters. So the whole production, the main production space is conceived as a central stage. In a way, we took these, the production, agricultural production as a, we think this is a very modern concept of performance. And the production is running 24 hours in a day. So the lighting is also treated as a stage lighting. And the space could also be used as a village center, a cultural space during non-production season. Another village, Caizhai, is known for its best tofu in the region. And in this case, the new tofu factory is built at the entrance of this village next to a large next to this historical building, a large scale in the village. And the building sits on an existing terraced site. Other programs are divided into just by the procedure of traditional way of making tofu, from preparation to this grinding compartment, and then boiling compartment, and deep frying, and then at the end, the cooling compartment. So this is a, again, it's also like a shared kitchen for the village family workshops, to integrate all these family workshops as the shareholders to operate this factory. But the production procedure is also opening up to the visitors as a learning educational program. And that's the sequence of traditional way of making tofu, stretching along this slope like a long scroll painting, opening up and inviting the visitors to observe this intangible cultural heritage from Caizhai village. That's the walkway parallel to the production sequence, and it's open to the public, open to the villagers who are often taking this as just a leisure lounge, as a open pavilion. So all these production factories worked with as a social structure to integrate the individual village family workshops into a collective economic entity. So the last project, I would like to introduce the housing project in Tiantian village, which has over 600 of years, but has been left almost vacant as a hollow village. And with this, we consider this is a experiment after a collaboration with local village communities and with the local government. The transformation of this Tiantian village is to convert all these abandoned vacant houses into homestay business and other cultural leisure programs to open up to the city residents, to visitors, as well as to providing these employment opportunities for the local villagers and to attract young villagers returning home. So the renovation of these houses and the overall village fabric is done by very careful and minimal intervention approaches. All these buildings maintained its original envelope to preserve the memory of the village. And again, construction is done by the local skilled workers. With the three main historical buildings are the public cultural space open as a public platform. And that's the renovation. Again, inside the house, we started to reorganize the space and work with to accommodate modern living space or functions, which is working as in the house. It's working as a contrast with the original building texture. It's a contrast between new and old. At the same time, this project, while the preservation on the building is rather minimal, very careful and sensitive approach, but the transformation of the village is a rather innovative social design to establish a hybrid collective economic entity to engage all the villagers in this operation. So we have three villager unions. The villagers can participate with their vacant house, vacant farmland, or equity, and also village collective as a collective participants. And then this entity is also sponsored by the town and county government. So this is the economic structure to preserve the basic interest of these villagers. Most important, to preserve their ownership on their houses and farmlands. So the whole operation of this Tiantian village preserved the very authentic rural country village life, which has also become an attraction for the urban residents. It engages with this social design to inspire the local village communities and also to introduce the rural village life to our urban visitors. That's it for my talk today. And I will give the floor to Yuan. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiantian, and on to Philip.
Hello, can you see the screen?
Yes, all good, thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thanks invitation from Martino. You create the exhibition, and it's a great honor for me to, secondly, I think second time to make a presentation, make the lecture to Columbia University. And today I would like to address the theme through the topic of machine and memory, recrafting the nostalgias in China. Nowadays, with the development of increasing sophisticated digital tools, including design tools, formation, optimization, iteration, or fabrication tools, from robotic platform to the artificial intelligence, we can now achieve different kind of approach to the production, mass production process of architecture away from the traditional crafts and the industrialization. So the relationship between the human and nature has been changed to the post-humanist process, social process, because technology turning to be the second factor between the human and nature. So over the past few years, New Leach and me set up a platform, Digital Futures. Yearly, we organize workshops and a conference and make a lot of discussions and promotions for the digital tools in architecture. So the machines right now becomes extension of human being. So which is really important, influence the architecture design, the thinking process, design process, and the construction process. Also, the architects and the material process has been totally changed from the abstract machine, from the human thinking to the collaboration between the human and tools, which is the extension of the human skills to re-understand the nature and re-understand the environment and try to readdress the human location on the planet. So keep this in mind, and we can interpret materials from two perspectives in contemporary architecture context. On the one hand, digital technology has been deeply embedded in the architecture production today, establish an informational process from design to fabrication. In this way, architecture is not only designed by human in correlation with the material properties and energetic condition, but also process the characteristic of digital information from those automatic machines. Through the information iteration process, we can be able to drive materials flows into the certain optimization states, which can keep us make a really good re-understanding from the geometry perspective, from the cultural perspective, and also from the social perspective. So I think I would like to address the two projects I designed several years ago to analyze how we try to achieve the new tools which can engage into the material intelligence, and also at the same time to benefit of, at the same time to balance the social cultural environment embodiment in the project. So this is a machine I want to highlight. We developed or set up, established in 2015, and which is the robotic platform with 18 axes, which is the abstract machine for the future digital factory, located in Shanghai. And actually on this platform, we're crafting robotics and try to achieve different kind of craftsmanship, which can have correlation not only to technology, but also to the social production process. And this is one of the projects we done several years ago, and also the mock-up was exhibited in M+ Hong Kong, and which is refabricate and the bricks and could be redesigned, understand the rhythm and the aesthetics of the local bricks. And also we develop some on-site in-situ robotics, which also means we do not only design the buildings, but also we design the tools. So this is on-site robotics can achieve more than 5 craftsmanship, including the timber craftsmanship and 3D printing, etc., and can move into the site and construct different buildings. So take one example from our workshop, robotic carpentry, which is the culture-oriented wood structure design and fabrication research. So in the exhibition, you can see all the components is prefabricated and which could be located by the reciprocal structure efficient based system, a structure system, and also all the details has been changed one by one. So we're crafting robotics and try to introduce the tools and collaborate with the designers, and the carpentry could be achieved not only by the carpenter, but also to the architecture students. So by implementing these scenarios, we introduced one of our projects, which is located in Sichuan province. We designed in 2017. And so the project located in the tradition local village, Dayi County, and which is the panda is from this county. And also the first time I was invited to visit the site and take a great impression for the environment surroundings. We can smell the greenness and also the site, and also including different kind of environment feeling. So they try to invite me to design the community center and also the 8 B&B hotels. And the villagers changed to be the stakeholder and try to make a new development understanding of how to engage their lives to the modern life. So in our design, I think we introduce the new technology, including the timber carpentry, and also we introduced the tradition crafts, including the bamboo weaving and the tiles. So this is the 8 village, 8 B&B village. So actually, totally we have 6 projects, which was designed and constructed from 2017 to 2018, 2 years. And today I have time to introduce 2 of them, the In Bamboo Community Center and also the B&B on the left. Also, we have some other programs, including the youth auto camps and also the exhibition craftsmen for the local craftsmen and etc. So this is the B&B, which located on the construction site under the several big trees. And we try to introduce the tradition tiles, and which standing on the timber roof system. And the villagers are very familiar with the material, but actually we actually make it possible to introduce the light into the middle courtyard of this the small B&B house, and keep the original trees. So this is a community center which is standing on the roadside, and the project we gave it is in bamboo. We can see through the allotments, the bamboos, and which is the typical Linpan styles scenery in Chengdu. And although the geometry system are totally changed, but actually the material and I think which keep the memory of the local villages, what is the community center in their neighborhood. So this is the style roofs, and also embracing the bamboo forest in the neighborhood. So this is models showing the Tectonics relationship, how we design the roof system and exhibit in Venice Biennale. And this model also was collected right now in Hong Kong and Plus. This is the steel and the timber integrate structure system. And the geometry actually is a double curvature loop, which twists together, but actually from outside, from the facade system is really tradition as a horizontal cantilever and transparent under the roof, and showing the people can embracing the surrounding environment and smell the air, and actually which the windows could be totally open, and that is a typical style in living style in Chengdu. So, but it's difficult to really how to construct this kind of curvature in the very efficient time. So you can see all the column beam system was categorized into different types, but all the joints are different because the height of the roof system. So we custom all the joints and very efficiently moving this kind of robotics and custom all the joints for the timber system. So this is the joint system. And this we name is like the digital twins for the optimization process and the fabrication process. And also we develop the tools on the robotics as effectors, how to fabricate the curvature beam. And the detail drawings for the project is not the plans, sections, detail drawings, but this kind of scripts to FE Robot, which is software we develop from the team, which can set up a connection from the Rhino grasshopper to the robotic machine. And this is a guard house for the entry, and actually this was the geometry system is controlled by the bamboo, and the surface also weaving by the local tradition labor. So the people stand in middle, who is the master local craftsman in the village, and he was 68 years old at that time, and I asked him, why you're still working on the side? He told me, without his guiding, the young generation don't understand how to weave in such a big scale by bamboo. So you can see it's really important to keep the linkage from the different generation to learning from their daddy and their parents, and to try to keep the tradition moving on. And also during the construction process, we can see when the greenery, the landscape was planted, the most of the workers are the females. So I asked one of them, why your husband and your sons coming to working on site? And they told me all of them moving to the big city. So it's kind of a special phenomenon. The young generation or the main labor all moving to the big city. So the urbanization actually make this kind of hollow phenomenon in China. So it's really important how to attract the people coming back, how to introduce the new technology and the new industry to rethinking on the mass production in the rural area of China, not just on the single building, but on how to construct building, how to reorganize the social productive process. So this is after construction of the projects. We shoot this video in 2018, but actually 2 months ago I visited back, and the village surroundings change a lot because local people make different development influenced by this community center and by this kind of new buildings for the community. So I think it's important for the future, not just give them a beautiful building, a house, but maybe we should be thinking how to teach them how to establish the new industry for the social productive process in architecture for the rural area of China. Okay, and based on the time limits, I introduce another project. The Inkstone Linpan Community Center, which is just 5 kilos away from the In Bamboo project, also in the same county. So this project also will make a lot of practice and demos to implement the robotic timber prefabrication and the brick mansion, also 3D printing as well. So this is the opening project. I make a speech and also at that time I teach a group of MIT students, and also we make a lecture on site in this building with Liu Jiakun and Xiang Ning, and with a interesting discussion on how to construct this building in the rural area of China. So this is the design process. You can see the design is not just the form, the geometry, but also including the optimization, the efficiency, and how to understand the structure system and the construction details of the project. So this is the optimization process to optimize the structure and timbers and make it really efficient in the special earthquake area of Chengdu to construct the big cantilever for the roof system. And we designed this beam, which is standing on the top, and as actually the most big cantilever maximum is like six meters. So the beam is have a timber and steel integrate joints and try to make the main beam cantilever learning from the tradition, but actually it's more than the tradition and based on the integrated structure system. So this is the wood beam gluing laminate process for the structures, and also the joints, the same fabrication as well. So this is the on-site work. You can see it is a steel structure and wooden timber beams integrate structure system. So the process of construction, also the facade, the skin is the prefabricate robotic fabricate bricks, components by components, and also the brick is we collect recycle bricks and try to make them recycle use on the facade by the location actually is parametric design and located as a special relationship to each other. So this is the foggy screen we shoot on the Linpan, which is a typical screen array in Sichuan, the bamboo forest and the farming land, and the water is integrated and flowing together. So the building standing in the middle of the Linpan, and also we designed a circulation which coming to be the farmers market in the weekend, and the farmers, local people passing through this building. So the circulation itself, the infrastructure itself changing to be the landscape. So this is the, we try to analyze our understanding the screenery tradition culture in China. So this is after foggy, the sunny day for the project, different perspective. So different circulation was integrated for the multifunctional open space for the local villagers, organize different events in this building. So also the farming land surrounding the allotments from the parents. So this is also changing to be another special local space. Different seasons. Here you can see one in the spring. In the spring, the landscape changed to be extremely beautiful, and also can see the brick prefabricate facade, and also the big cantilever roof system. Collecting the water falling down and to the middle courtyard. Also, we introduced different crafts into the projects, including the right image, all the furnitures, and the initial walls, internal walls in the building was 3D printed by the recycled or environment-friendly plastics, modified plastics. So, okay, I would like to finish my lecture by the small video. And this video also was exhibited in Venice Biennale last year. Okay, thank you. Thanks for your attention. Martino, that is.
Thank you so much, Philip, and thank you all three speakers for three really truly amazing and inspirational presentations with just extraordinary work. It's a thrill to see you speak about these and see these beautiful images that really touch so many of us. We have a very large number of questions and we have only 30 minutes left. So I will try to make some groupings and I'll ask all of the speakers to try to keep your answers as brief as possible so we can try to get as many answers as possible. We received a few questions, particularly for Zhang Ke and Tiantian, asking who funded these projects, who is the client? Zhang Ke, would you like to start, and then maybe Tiantian?
Yes, this is really a good critical question. I was typing answers already during Philip's presentation. The first two projects, Micro Yuan Children's Library and Micro Hutong, were both funded among the funds raised myself with my friends. So it's basically initiated by ourselves because it's, I talked about it in the Hutong Metabolism book with the conversation with Nandita Korea. It's really about action, because in Beijing, in China, we've been talking about this alternative way of old city renewal for decades, and because nobody believed that any alternative way is possible. So about 2012, after 2 years of study, we decided to say, okay, we just going to raise our fund and do something in real. And the two, the co-living courtyard and the social housing was funded by the government. We were commissioned after they saw our build projects. So yes, that's the lesson. This is what I learned from the Indian architect Charles Correa. Is that you can't stand by, just watch. In the fact that we see problems, architects have to take actions. I think this also is something we learned ourselves, because most of the time architecture and architects has become a passive kind of profession. But in dealing with urban issues, I think it's very critical for us to initiate projects ourselves and just do it with whatever resource we could pull ourselves. I think Tiantian also did a lot of these projects. I will let Tiantian to explain herself.
All the projects we've done in Songyan, they are public funded, but also in a collective way. It's also quite innovative financial economic structure behind all these projects. There are subsidy coming from cultural department from the province, and also subsidy coming from maybe cultural or tourism, agricultural. So, and part of the funding is also from village collective money. And I mean, this whole Song Yan story, to me, it's a social structure. It's a social design system. So the funding is, in a way, when you were working in the rural context, you have to find a way to receive funding, whether the project applied to culture or applied to agriculture, financial requirements.
Excellent. I actually have a follow-up question for you, Tiantian, from an anonymous attendee asking if you could explain how the local community was involved in the decision-making process, and if the overall business progressively became financially sustainable, or if it still depended on government funds.
All of these projects engage the communications with the local village communities from very beginning to discuss their what is the most essential to them, or for example, ancestor or something, or even the brown sugar production, tofu production, whatever that they are proud of, and we work with that content. And the construction is also done by the local villagers, and most of the projects are using the local building method and material, and this is also strategic to engage everybody into this procedure. Well, also considering the tight budget on each project. So in a way, I would say this is very pragmatic structure that to engage all the communities. And some of the projects are self-sustainable and financially, like the Tiantian village has been doing quite well, even in the pandemic. But some of the projects, like the cultural project, well, I would say that, and all these cultural projects, including the Ancestors Hall and also the in Hakka Endangered Museum, the buildings are conceived as low maintenance operation. So it's just, you don't really pay much of the cost to maintain the buildings. For example, air conditioning or just maintenance, staffing. All these things are eliminated in the project, just to and it also, that's the local way dealing with public ancestors' halls in every village.
Excellent. Another question for you, Tiantian, by Xinji Miaho. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. The question relating to preservation heritage status. Do these villages receive an official status as historic cultural village? And do such kind of reuse renovation program, we already answered that, are they supported by the local government? Yes. So the question is, do they receive some kind of heritage status?
For the villages, some of the villages are entitled as the traditional village by the Chinese Ministry of Housing and Construction, 住建部. So the traditional villages will receive funding for preservation and also coming with regulations on any of the new additions or constructions happening in the village. But for those non-Chinese, non-traditional village, like some of the villages are rather modern. For example, the Xing village with the brown sugar, and it's rather a more contemporary and looking. But in this village, the brown sugar workers are entitled as cookie masters, as the brown sugar production is entitled with the intangible heritage, cultural heritage by the local county government. So all these workers become the masters, the celebrities in the village.
Yeah, it's incredible, actually. Let's go back to Beijing, to the Hutongs. There's two questions for you, Zhang Ke, relating to the materiality. One was about why concrete, and another one by Ruo Jia. Are these spaces livable in the hotel project? I think the person is asking about the micro hostel, and so I think you may want to say something to that also.
Yes, the concrete question is a very good one. We had choices of either steel reinforcement or concrete reinforcement due to the contemporary seismic requirements coding of the city, because none of these traditional wooden brick structures in the old city were seismically stable for earthquake. As required here in Beijing. So when we have to apply for approval, official approval of the Planning Bureau, then we either have to reinforce it with steel frame or with concrete frame. So that's one of the reasons. Of course, the other reason is we wanted to experiment ourselves this concrete added with Chinese ink to see a new material that could be working subtly with the gray brick environment and creating a good dialogue between the existing wooden structure, between the existing and the new in a subtle way. So when you first see it, it doesn't jump out as very loudly. As I talked before, that in the old city it's very easy to shout aloud, but how to make a recognizable contemporary presence at the same time keeping it quiet as a dialogue. So that was the experiment that we have been developing. Of course, that this doesn't exclude the careful maintenance of the wooden structure, of replacing some of the wooden beams and reinforcing the wooden columns as the typical conservation projects in the West would do. So the concrete, it was deliberately added as a new contemporary layer. But this is not ordinary concrete. It was subtly tuned to work with the existing background.
Excellent. You've already actually answered another question by Lu Shiyang, who's actually specifically asking about the maintenance of the existing wood buildings, if there was any effort and thinking going into that. So we can say this was answered. There's another question for you, Zhang Ke, by Peter Siegenthaler, asking how many hutongs are actually left in Beijing, and are there official policies, municipal, for example, that effectively protect them and encourage their reuse?
Yes, by the year of 2000 and 2001, at that time we have about 85, 90% of the hutongs in the old city were left. But the destruction really happened in the past 2 decades. So because there was when the economy started to rocket up in Beijing, in China. So there was a policy which was clearly not correct of putting development in as the precondition of conservation. But this has been reverted in the past 5 years. So when we started to work on it in around 2010, there was about 30% of the old Hutong areas were still left. It was shown in one of my slides in the first few pages of the existing area. But within this, there's only 17% were strictly conserved area. And the good thing is now conservation is being put in the old city throughout China as the first priority. So that's the good thing. But the risk is also what I talked about, is it's now the conservation equals to facade restoration and beautification of a nostalgic old look. That still remains a problem.
Thank you. We go back to Songyang County. There's another question for Tiantian by Lucy Young, and she is wondering about the revival of traditional crafts that you were invoking when you're talking about edifying a local economy. And the audience is asking, will the local villagers, especially those young people, autonomously apply these crafts in local construction or only for the outsiders project? So I think the question here is, is this creating a locally sustainable economy, or is it mainly directed towards sort of a touristic presentation of the economy and the livelihoods?
This is definitely for local and sustainable. For example, the brown sugar is production. The production is done every year. It happened in the winter season, but tourism isn't the main purpose of all these projects. But it does open up the assets, the heritage as a valuable assets to the tourism. And well, I would say this is rather cultural, educational tourism in local, in the region. And all these workers, I mean, with the production as a public cultural event, it increased the price of all this production. For example, the price of the brown sugar has increased 4 to 5 times in the past years, and also attracted young villagers returning home and joining the production to make enough income, actually better income than working as a construction site workers in the cities. So this has becoming a kind of a circulation in terms of the product, but also in terms of inspiring, attracting new villagers returning home.
Wonderful. We actually have a related question about craft people for Philip. And this is a question by Jiao Zhang, who is curious about the craftsman role in the digital fabrication process. Do you think they are going to be replaced by the robotic arm? Is high-tech going to replace traditional craft?
Yeah, I think as a role, because I'm the professor leading a very big team in Tongji and to make R&D research in the architecture building technology. So I think we try to set up a new model, which is the human-machine collaborative future. That is not based on the robotics, but maybe some other machines or softwares, toolbox, which can give extension skills to human being. So make a lot of development based on PhD program on the building technology, including softwares and hardwares, robotics. I think the future is not a solo human-centric design-based process, but the future should be based on the human-machine collaborative and re-understanding the human and the planet and how to more environment-friendly living on the planet and more efficiently or more accurately address the human beings in the nature, including the buildings and the human beings, buildings and human beings. So I think I do not want to predict if the robotics replace human labor, but I want to predict the future should be a human-machine collaborative future. And we training such a big team of the future architects I think the future architects should learning how to re-understanding the environment, re-understanding the tools, re-understanding the industry. So how to address the more ethical or reasonable practice for the future, including China, including the whole world.
And actually another question for you, Philip, relating more specifically now to the question of preservation. Jiasang is asking, all of your projects today seem like newly constructed architecture. Some of them are reusing original materials. I'm wondering, is it possible to use digital fabrication tools in the adaptive reuse projects, especially those additions to existing buildings?
It's a very good question. I think I'm not expert in the preservation or conservation design. I think that's a really important to understand the authentics of the buildings and how to take care of the building in the urban context. Most of my projects located in the context, and in my design process, I consider very dedicated and carefully for the surroundings. I think including the culture things, environment, and including material, so on and so forth. So I think most of my practice actually try to introduce the surrounding the materials and also the surrounding relationship into the crafting process and the construction process. I also have several projects, including in Tongji. I renovate the Tongji auditorium more than 10 years ago, and also on the Huangpu Riverside, I also renovate a traditional building. And also in the process, we introduce a lot of building technology understanding, including ventilation, energy saving, all these kind of details. But maybe this kind of technology is hidden in the authentics of renovation process. So I think sometimes what is absence, what is presence is important to be decision by the designer. And the most important attitude is how we can friendly looking surroundings and how to friendly design the futures based on this context. Thank you.
Two more questions for you, Philip. Lucy Young is wondering, has a question relating the volume of your projects. And she's mentioning that, you know, by implanting such a big architecture or architectural complex into the rural context, what type of influence do these projects form to the local people? So the question is, what is the impact of large buildings in a rural community? And actually a related question by Anna Rabinowitz is, how involved was the local community in determining the programming design materials? And what was important to preserve, construction technique or the traditional building form?
Okay, that's a good question. I think as to the scale, which based on the new program, actually the urban or the rural development in China is increasing dramatically over the past 20 years. So I think the program is not from the designer, it's from actually the communication with the local community and the local government. I think to designers, it's important to think about the scale and the height, and also how to integrate into the urban, the rural fabric. So I think the scale of the buildings around 2,000 square meters in the neighborhood is okay. The first impact project we have in the village, we have 86 families, and the site is constructed on the two courtyards, because of people moving out. So it's teared down for more than 5 years. So the local people take away the two old buildings, two courtyards. So we designed two circles to twisting together, which based on the tradition original site. I think we taken the scale of the building in consideration very carefully. And the second building actually, which is the collaborate with OCT, which is one of the most biggest developer who focus on the rural area development, which is the first exhibition space for the project. So I think the local surroundings are all the farming land. So that project is showing the new lifestyle or new possibility, how to integrate the traditional local living models and events, and how to introduce this kind of events to the urban citizens, so urban people. So I think the skills are okay, and that's showing the population density, the development speed, and in China, which the program actually all based on the communication with the local people. So I think that's the phenomenon, what's happened over the past few years in China. As to what's the second question?
The second question, sorry, what was the second question? You know what? I forgot. We have 5 minutes left. I have a couple more questions for Tiantian. The first one is by Jiu Li, who was impressed by the idea of integrating the practices of intangible cultural heritage into those places, meaning the villages in Songyang County. My question links to tourism and the ICH, so related to something we have already discussed. Will the visitation negatively affect the intangible cultural heritage, leading to a staged performance? What roles can architects play to mitigate that concern, if it exists?
I would say the other way around. We are working on both. We are focusing on the production, to provide a better space for production with higher standards. But at the same time, we also open up the performance, to attract visitors, which is it works with the tourism and educational tourism, and it's not a bad thing, because when the production was done in the family workshops, basically the family kitchen, the product couldn't fit with food certificate requirements, and so when collecting all these family workshops into a village union, first, it engages the individual villages into the market economy with a collective economic format. And second, it also actually provide a open platform to observe, but also as a kind of a request on the production workers on their daily work. Would I put it this way? I think it's rather a motivation, not a requirement. It's actually a motivation. Like I said, in the brown sugar cookie masters are becoming the celebrities. So they do, when they're making the brown sugar, it's not only a performance, and they're something they're proud of. So they also want to improve the quality of whether brown sugar or tofu or rice wine. So these are, we think it's just kind of all many things coming together into all these intangible cultural heritage has the ability to revive the village and to kind of bring a communication, interaction between the villages and visitors.
Martino,
yeah,
I would like to say something about Tiantian's project, because it's very inspiring. Since we are doing some village renewal projects in Yunnan currently, I think the one of the most inspiring aspect of Tiantian's projects are she always engage with production of local production, and such as factories. But those factories are not just functional, nice spaces. They're also as community center always. So it becomes in the end as a functioning as a catalyst of both the local economy and as interaction spaces, communal spaces for the locals. I think this aspect is very inspiring for for ourselves, currently doing countryside projects in villages.
Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that, Zhang Ke. And I can absolutely confirm what you were just saying, having had the opportunity to visit Zhejiang County myself and experiencing that in person. And I'm afraid we are coming very close to the end of our session. I do want to ask one more question from the audience. Again, relating to Tiantian's project. Where and how do these villages keep their traditional construction skills and craftsmanship? Is there any training center or mentorship for continuing these preservation contractors? So also relating to the intangible cultural heritage question we just had.
Yes, there have been training programs going on simultaneously with all these production, and especially the local building construction method with younger, actually also the demand on renovating the local traditional houses also inspired younger villagers returning home and joining this the educational program, training program organized by the local government. And there also for the production factories, I would say that every villager in the village are skilled workers. They have been making this at home every day, so there were no need for further training. But it also it's more of a kind of an educational classroom for the young visitors from other region, from the county urban center or from other villages.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tiantian, Zhang Ke, and Philip Yuan, for your wonderful presentations and for you sharing your thoughts. I think we've raised a number of really very crucial questions that will continue tomorrow. The relationship of craft and technology, the question of the rural and the urban, the question of heritage and preservation with regard to new construction, and so on and so forth. And with that, I would like to give it back to Jorge. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Martino. And again, thank you all for your wonderful presentations. What an inspiring evening. And thank you to all the participants in the audience as well for I don't think I've ever seen such a question and answer on fire. I mean, there was just so much going on in parallel. So it just speaks to the amazing depth and the beauty of the work, the really moving project. So we're just really thrilled, again, really honored to have your participation. We are now in the very kind of, in very unique fashion, going to take the longest break a conference has ever taken. We are going to take an 11-hour break, and we are going to reconvene in 11 hours. Again, some of us in China will go about our day and come back to the conference. Others will go to sleep and wake up tomorrow with a whole new ideas and questions, and we'll have 4 more presentations. So please join us back at 9 a.m. tomorrow for the continuation of the Fitch Colloquium, honoring the founder of the Historic Preservation Program, James Marston Fitch, and in collaboration with MoMA. So thank you all. We cannot hear the roaring clapping of the audience, but I do it for everyone. And thanks again. Have a good day, good evening, and we'll see you in 11 hours. Thanks again. Goodbye.